Hey friends, welcome back to the Bald Booktuber. My name is Scott. Today is January 6th. It is day 6 of the 31 videos in 31 days extravaganza. Yesterday we did Priority Fantasy Series. Today I'm going to go over not necessarily priority, but fantasy standalones that I have interest in reading. And I have a veritable baker's dozen for you, 13 of them, which is an odd number, but that's what we're going with. I don't have these ranked in any specific order. These are just books that I have an interest in and may get to here and there at some point. So, some of this has been cheating. This has been some watching videos of people that have made fantasy standalone top 10s, like my buddy Jake Bishop has a great one. Some of them has been friends of mine, like my friend Jane, who's a subscriber and fellow moderator on Mike's Discord. She gave me, not me, but she gave a list of fantasy standalones that are great. I am a big fantasy guy, but I haven't read a lot of fantasy standalones. So this is going to be me figuring out what there is to offer as much as telling you what is out there. So I don't know if or when I'll get to any of these, but hopefully these are some things that you can check out as well. Or if you've read them already, let me know. But we're going to go ahead and get started here. So the first one, I guess if I was going to rank anything in terms of what I want to read the most, this would be number one. And this is The Princess Bride by William Goldman. The Princess Bride movie is one of my favorite all-time movies. Goldman, of course, also did the screenplay for it. In this case, the audiobook is narrated by the director, Rob Reiner, who directed the film, which I think is really cool. For whatever reason, I just have never read this, and this is one that I think I probably need to read, just to say that I have and to see what the differences are between the book and, again, one of my all-time favorite movies. Next up, we're going with Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny, and I hadn't heard a ton of buzz about this up until recently. My buddy Matt over at Matt on Books did a review of this. I don't necessarily know that I should be putting this on a fantasy list. It's probably more of a sci-fi standalone. But it involves, I believe, some extraterrestrial beings and stuff. So I don't know. I'll skirt that line and just call them angels and call it fantasy. So that's fine. I don't know a super ton about it outside of what he said in his review, but it's a book that he continues to think about. I will link his review in my description. But it is definitely one that is moving on up that list. It didn't have an audiobook up until recently, and a gentleman named Matthew Godfrey, who apparently is an award-winning narrator, narrated it. It's funny to me because I actually know a Matthew Godfrey in real life, same name, just a coincidence or whatever. But I don't know. That enough is for me to want to immersively read this and check it out. I think it's relatively short as well. I think it's probably around 300, 350 pages, so should be pretty easy. And that's that one. All right, next up we have The War of Flowers by Tad Williams. And of course, Tad Williams is one of the pillars of the fantasy genre. I haven't read nearly enough of him, and this is his Portal Fantasy standalone. The only person I know that has read this is Jimmy over at the Fantasy Network. I will find and link his review. I remember watching that back in the day. Portal Fantasies are kind of iffy, so-so for me. They can go either way. Obviously, I love Narnia. I really enjoyed The Legend of Blackjack. But in general, the concept of Portal Fantasy is not always my favorite, so it'd be interesting to see whether this is something that will appeal to me or not. I don't know anything about it. I didn't go back and rewatch that review, so I don't know anything about the plot elements or anything like that, but It's Tad Williams. He's a fantastic writer. It's a standalone. It's worth checking out. And I think it's a pretty beefy one, as most of Tad Williams' books are. So I think it's 800 plus pages. This one has never had an audiobook produced, so nothing to say on that front. All right, next we have a book that I've started a couple times and never finished for various reasons, and that's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This is by Susanna Clark, and I really do enjoy the writing. It is set in sort of a 19th century, I think that's the right century, England, and it involves two kind of competing magicians at the time. And magic is interesting in this world because the idea is that magic is real and exists, but it's limited to a very minute number of people that can actually do it. There's kind of a group of individuals that call themselves magicians, but it's more in the academic sense, and they study kind of the history of magic and these types of things, but there is like two people that can actually do it, and that's the two characters that are mentioned in the title. If I'm messing up that plot line, sorry. I did start this again back in November, but that was before the big Robin Hobb reread that has taken over my life. So I'll get to this again at some point. I really do enjoy the writing in it, and I really do enjoy Simon Preble's narration. He's fantastic for this book. So that's going to happen. I just don't know when. Again, this is a pretty beefy one. I think it's 600-700 pages. And one of the interesting things about it is there's a lot of footnotes. And the way Preble does the narration is he reads the footnotes as they're sort of referenced, but all the footnotes are at the back of the book. So it makes it kind of strange to listen and read at the same time. But that's all right. All right, next up we have Sword of Kigen by M.L. Wong. This is narrated by Andrew Tell. And I continue to hear mixed reviews of this particular book. Some people have it among their favorite things ever. Some people didn't vibe with it at all. But it'll be interesting to see where I fall. I think there are elements I've heard about it that I would really, really enjoy. I think there's like a mother-son relationship in there that's really good. It sounds like the world building and stuff is really good for a standalone, so I'll be interested to check it out and see if that will be for me. There was just a Kickstarter that I didn't participate in, but there was just a Kickstarter campaign to release really nice versions of this book, and I know some people hopped on that, so obviously it's well thought of. The fact that it can get that type of campaign and do well means that it has a pretty big audience. So definitely this is one that I'll get to at some point and check it out and see if it is my kind of thing. All right. The next one I hadn't really heard anything about up until kind of this year and really sort of recently, and that's The Library at Mount Char. And this is Scott Hawkins, narrated by Hilary Huber. And kind of the premise behind this one is sounds pretty cool to me. So our main character is a female protagonist, and as a child, she and other children apparently are what she calls adopted, and she calls it Adoption Day, by this sort of, I don't know if it's like a supernatural being or something of that nature, called the Father. And he raises them in his personal library, where it sounds like there's a lot of supernatural learning and stuff going on. So that's all I know about it. I didn't want to know any more about it, other than I know a few people that really, really enjoyed it. But that alone sounds like a pretty cool premise. So it's one I definitely do want to check out at some point. All right, the next one, I know this is one of Joanna's favorite books, or at least that's what I remember, and that's The Neverending Story. The original author is Michael, and I don't know how, it's E-N-D-E. I don't know if it's Indy. I'm not sure how he pronounced it. He was a German author. As I understand it, the original was in German, translated to English. obviously made into a very popular movie, which I only vaguely remember, other than that I remember really loving it as a child. So if and when I read this, I will certainly do the movie as a companion to kind of compare and contrast and see, what the differences are, what the one adds that the other takes away, that sort of stuff. There is no audio narration for this. I did check, which is unfortunate because it feels like the type of story that would benefit from a really great narrator, but what are you going to do? All right. The next one on our list is A Brightness Long Ago, and this is by Guy Gavriel Kay. It is narrated by Simon Vance. And originally on this list, I had Tigana, which was his first standalone, and I am going to read that and probably read it before the others. But Jake Bishop, who I trust implicitly when it comes to anything Guy Gavriel Kay related, because that's his guy, says this is his best standalone. So I like to read the best if I can. So he said this is a crazy awesome book. Those aren't necessarily his words, but it's one that definitely he holds a special place for. So that's why this is the one I have on the list as one I really want to get to. And of course, Simon Vance is on my Mount Rushmore of narrators. He is my guy. So anything with Simon Vance is good for me, and he narrates a lot of Guy Gavriel Kay, so that's good for me. All right, our next entry is an interesting one, and that's The Night Circus by Aaron Morgenstern. And what's interesting about this one is, I don't know that it's really fantasy. Might be more of a magical realism, might be more of a literary fiction. I'm not really sure, but I'm putting it on this list. I have heard really good things about her prose and about her writing in general. It's interesting to take a peek at Goodreads, because about half of my Goodreads friends that I trust their opinions have this rated really high in the 4 and 5 range, and a lot have it 2 and below. So it's an interesting split. And I believe when you look at the overall Goodreads, it's similar, where there's a lot of variance on people loving versus really, really hating and or disliking this book. So it'll be interesting to see where I fall. I know it obviously involves a circus. When I read the premise, it sort of reminded me of The Prestige, which is a movie and a book I really enjoy. And maybe it isn't anything like that. I don't know. But if it's even half as good, I think I would at least enjoy it. So this is one I want to check out just for myself to see where I fall on that continuum. The Night Circus is narrated by Jim Dale. It would be my first experience with Jim Dale. As we know, maybe you don't know, infamously, I have never read Harry Potter, never listened to Harry Potter. I don't particularly have any desire to start that, so I look forward to the unsubs that are going to be upset about that, but I have heard great things about Jim Dale, so I'll give that a try. All right, our next one, and I mentioned that Princess Bride is probably the one I'm most looking forward to. This is probably number 2 if I were going to rate them. It's The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. And my buddy Jake has this on his top 10. He read it and really enjoyed it. This is a major influence for some of my favorite writers. So Robin Hobb loves this book. Patrick Rothfuss loves this book, which is interesting because he actually does the narration for the book. And I don't know that I want to listen to Rothfuss narrate a book, but I'd rather read new words from him, but you can't have everything. So I might check that out. I'm not sure. So this is kind of key right now because Beagle is releasing some new stuff in 2023. So in April, he's releasing a collection of 2 novellas that are set in this world, and that collection is called The Way Home. So I'll be reading that, presumably, if I like this. And he's doing 2 sets of short stories, kind of called the Essential Peter S. Beagle Volumes 1 and 2. And those release on May 16th. I actually have NetGalley copies of those. So I'd like to get reviews of those done. Again, I'm not the biggest short story guy in the world, but I'm trying to incorporate more of that as we go. Maybe I'll learn to appreciate the short medium a little bit more. All right, next up is The Ocean at the End of the Lane. This is Neil Gaiman. I don't know, is it Gaiman or Gaiman? I don't know. He also does the narration, which is pretty cool. I like when an author narrates their own stuff. That makes it either really, really good, or in the case of Stephen King, really, really bad. So we will see where it falls, but I've heard great things about, I'm just going to say Gaiman's narration. This is sort of a dreamlike sequence, as I understand it. A guy goes back to kind of confront his past. I don't know a ton about it, other than everybody seems to universally love this book. Many people saying it is Gaiman's best. I wasn't wild or the biggest fan of either American Gods or Anansi Boys. Both are certainly readable. Both are well written and objectively good books. They just weren't necessarily for me. I'm hoping that this will be for me, because I'm certain it probably will be well written. And everything I hear about it is, again, lavished with praise. So excited to get to this one. All right, I can't do a video without mentioning my boy Christopher Rocchio, the author of the Sun Eater series. And one of his very favorite authors is Tim Powers, a guy I had never heard of until I met Rocchio, and now I've heard of him a lot. And Powers is sort of what Rocchio calls Stephen King-ish in terms of being kind of the heir apparent to the weirdness that Lovecraft used to do. So again, the lines sort of blur when it comes to what the genre is, but I'm going to go with his standalone called On Stranger Tides. This is a pirate-themed type of fairy tale almost. My understanding, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is that part of the Pirates of the Caribbean, and especially the movie On Stranger Tides, was based on this book. Again, I could be 100% wrong on that. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, but I believe so. And some of the Pirates of the Caribbean stuff is good, so I want to check it out. Interestingly enough, maybe it's interesting to me, Bronson Pinchot does the narration, and he apparently does a lot of narration. But if you're not familiar with who that is, I'm going to show my age for a moment here. Bronson Pinchot played Balky in Perfect Strangers back in the, I think that was the 80s. It might have been the 90s, probably the 80s. So interesting to see. I know that obviously the accent and stuff he did on the show was way exaggerated and different than his real voice and real way that he says things. But yeah, it'd be interesting to hear how he narrates a book, because again, he's been credited with narrating like over 300 books, which is crazy to me. I didn't realize that was what he did. And then finally, kind of ending on a controversial one here, and I'll kind of talk through it. I've wanted to read this for a while, and I think I'm finally going to bite the bullet at some point, but it's Mists of Avalon. This is by Marion Bradley Zimmer. And the reason that it is controversial, if you're not aware, is that she did awful things during her lifetime, and helped her husband do awful things as well. And a lot of that didn't come to light until after her death in 1999. Terrible, terrible things. And certainly not condoning any of those things or saying any of that is right or should happen. The good news is all of the sales of any of her books at this point go to helping children. They go to various foundations that help children. If you really want to know some of the terrible things that happened, it's just a Google search away. You can look it up on Wikipedia. I wouldn't recommend it. It is not for the squeamish of heart, and certainly not something that is casual reading. So I wouldn't even go down that trail unless you're super curious. The only reason I bring it up whatsoever in this video is because I want people to know I don't condone any of that. I'm not reading this for her as a person. I'm reading it because it's supposed to be a classic within the genre, and if I've purchased the book and or the audiobook, it goes to a worthy cause. The audiobook narrator I've heard great things about. It's Davina Porter. She does the Outlander series and is many people's favorite narrator that I've talked to. So I am anxious to hear her. I haven't done any samplings or anything like that, but that also pushes this up to something I'd like to read. And that is really the list. Quick and easy 13 books that are fantasy or fantasy adjacent standalones. Books that I will mix in from time to time. As we all know, I am a fantasy guy, which means I am a series reader, but occasionally it's nice to mix in just a quick and easy standalone, or even a little bit longer standalone, and know that that's kind of a complete story in and of itself, kind of self-contained. So I hope everyone continues to have a great month of January. This has been fun so far and will continue to be. And until next time, publication order always, my friends.